But as this state, home to Martin Luther King and John Lewis, knows better than most, the battle for the right to vote is never, ever over. And it's not over here in this state of Georgia. So we're in a fight again. It's a fight we need to win.
The president in Georgia today, where he met with, among others, Stacey Abrams. Our friend Jeremy Peters of the New York Times reports Republicans see restricting voting as their new center of gravity, as he puts it, quote, passing new restrictions on voting, in particular tougher limits on early voting and vote by mail, is now at the heart of the right strategy to keep donors and voters engaged as Mr. Trump fades from public view. Back with us tonight, Jason Johnson, campaign veteran and journalist, contributor to the Griot, professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State University, and Tim Miller, contributor to the Bulwark, former comms director for Jeb Bush. Professor, I'd like to begin with you, and I want to play for you something Senator Warnock said to Joy Reid tonight. We'll discuss on the other side.
Those of us who have the honor of representing the people in both houses of Congress, the only reason we're there and able to argue about anything is because somebody voted for us to be there. And so this wholesale systemic effort to disenfranchise millions of Americans is a threat to the democracy itself.
Democracy itself. Dr. Johnson, overstatement or fact?
It's a fact, Brian, and here's what's interesting. We know that this is about campaign strategy on the part of Republicans and not a fundamental belief in democracy, because many of the Republican legislatures who were trying to push through these brand new restrictive bills have already backed off once they found out that Coca-Cola and the Chamber of Commerce for the state are against these kinds of bills. This is what is so terrible about all of this. If somebody wanted to be concerned about election integrity issues in Georgia, they would look at the voting machine problems that happened in 2018. If somebody was actually concerned about election integrity in Georgia, they would notice different polling locations being opened and closed at strange times. But that's not what Republicans are concerned about. They're angry that their state is now represented by a millennial and an African American. They're terrified that in 2022, with the nation's eyes on Georgia, that Stacey Abrams will become the first African-American woman to be a governor of the state. So rather than going out and campaigning, rather than coming up with better ideas, rather than doing something about COVID, Republicans in Georgia and other places are focused on trying to keep black, brown, tan, and young people from voting.
Tim, is there anyone out there in the Republican Party that truly sees this as a winner? Can you picture some old donor somewhere in a lazy boy saying, you know, 1-6 was a turnoff for me, but if you're really promising me voter suppression, I'm getting my checkbook, I'm all in?
I don't know about the donor culture, Brian, but I do think from a strategy standpoint, they see this as a winner, partially for what Jason has laid out, and partially for what we've talked about on the show before, which is, you know, look, the Republicans have only won one popular vote contest at the presidential level, you know, since I was in middle school. Right? I mean, it's been quite a bad run all the way through this century. And so they see the path forward, not of what we proposed back in 2012, which was appealing to a broader part of the electorate, but instead trying to limit voting, obviously in African-American communities, and limit voting among early voting and other things that Democratic voters like to do. And so they see it as a strategic path forward, not any sort of deep-seated principle, not anything that's going to get any, you know, lazy boy donors excited, but just an imperative for winning.
Tim, a trigger warning. I'm going to mention MTG. The Times has an interesting take tonight on the new class in Congress, not just Marjorie Taylor Greene, not just the QAnon caucus, but a lot of those in their rookie year that have an R after their names, being more interested in performance art, way more interested in building their brand than legislating. Of course, in her case, she's probably finding really helps to be on committees for that kind of thing.
Yeah, look, I think this is a critical point, Brian. You're seeing this turnover in the Republican Party where you had a lot of these folks who kind of quietly went along with Trumpism because they didn't know what else to do. Your Rob Portmans and your Richard Burrs, they're retiring. These are your old Republican men. They're all retiring. This new class that came in, MTG and Madison Cawthorn and Lauren Boebert, but others, obviously in the last class, Matt Gaetz, they are going to be met in this next Congress by entirely a class of people that only care about the performance that came up in politics in Trumpism. Right. If you look at the Ohio Senate race, for example, you've got Josh Mandel, as the prime example. This is the front runner right now. All he's doing is just obnoxious tweets, like baiting Twitter to try to ban him so that he can pretend to do performative grievance art. This is what you're going to see. Maybe Lara Trump in North Carolina. This is, I think, what you're going to see in this next class is, the kind of quiet enablers moving out, and then the people coming in being more all in on the Trump style of politics.
Professor, you get the last word tonight, and it's an important question. We've just witnessed, all of us together, another emotional week in our country. What is the chance that we have just seen a turning point?
Little or nothing. Brian, and I can take this right back to Georgia. Look, I'm familiar with that area. I used to live in Georgia for a long, long time. We will not see the changes we want. We didn't see it after Sandy Hook. We haven't seen it after every single shooting. And it works perfectly what we're talking about here. I can go to Georgia today and buy a gun and walk out of the store with it. But you can't do same-day voter registration in that state. And as long as that's where the values are of many of our politicians, we'll continue to see tragedies like this occur every 5, 6, 7 weeks in this country until someone finally recognizes we need to value human life over political playing.
To our viewers, I wish we had better news to report, but at least we have two terrifically smart guys to talk about what we've just witnessed this week. Jason Johnson, Tim Miller, two friends of this broadcast. Gentlemen, thank you both. Have a good weekend if that's possible.